Is this out of the picture if I put it here? Great.
Yeah. What we're hoping to do in this whole series is look at this technology. Why is a computer so interesting? So I'm going to start that way.
Okay.
So what is it? What's different about this machine?
Excuse me, I have one quick request.
Yep.
And that is don't drill your fingers in front of that mic because that's going to pick you up.
All right, you're on.
Turn.
By the way, the next time when you do an interview at the factory, that place that we found, probably the best location. We found a way to boost you up enough so you're over the rail, and you can see the two-armed robot.
Yeah, great.
It's a nice shot. Great. Do we have speed?
Yeah.
Okay. What is it about this machine? Why is this machine so interesting? Why has it been so influential?
I'll give you my point of view on it. I remember reading a magazine article a long time ago, when I was 12 years old maybe, I think it was Scientific American, I'm not sure. And the article proposed to measure the efficiency of locomotion for lots of species on planet Earth, to see which species was the most efficient at getting from point A to point B. And they measured the kilocalories that each one expended. So they ranked them all, and I remember that the Condor won. The Condor was the most efficient at getting from point A to point B. And humankind, the crown of creation, came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. So that didn't look so great. But let me do this over again, because I'm just
Sure.
sort of can say this better. I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the Condor won, came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else, and humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for the crown of creation. And but somebody there had the imagination to test the efficiency of a human riding a bicycle. Human riding a bicycle blew away the Condor, all the way off the top of the list. And it made a really big impression on me that we humans are tool builders, and that we can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind. Something that takes us far beyond our inherent abilities. And I think we're just at the early stages of this tool, very early stages. And we've come only a very short distance, and it's still in its formation, but already we've seen enormous changes. I think that's nothing compared to what's coming in the next 100 years.
In Program 6, we're going to look at some of the past predictions of why people have been so wrong about the future. And one of the notions is that today's vision of a standalone computer is just as limited as those past visions of it being only a number cruncher. What's the difference philosophically between a network machine and a standalone machine?
Let me answer that question in a slightly different way. There have been, if you look at why the majority of people have bought these things so far, there have been two real explosions that have propelled the industry forward. The first one really happened in 1977, and it was the spreadsheet. I remember when Dan Filestra, who ran the company that marketed the first spreadsheet, walked into my office at Apple one day and pulled out this disk from his vest pocket and said, I have this incredible new program. I call it a visual calculator, and it became VisiCalc. And that's what really propelled the Apple II to the success it achieved, more than any other single event. And with the invention of Lotus 123, and I think it was 1982, that's what really propelled the IBM PC to the level of success that it achieved. So that was the first explosion, was the spreadsheet. The second major explosion that's driven the desktop industry has been desktop publishing.
Excuse me, we just lost a light.
And if you check the, get a break here. Chris.
Yeah, control, Michael.
When is this going to be broadcast? Next year sometime?
We have Fall 91. Co-production with the BBC.
Uh-huh.
And actually, one part is going to be interesting. I'm going to ask you at the end. Is we're going to dramatize the future, what we guess our future is, because we've got a dramatic budget in England. Whatever our guess is, it's going to be wrong. But at least we want to give people a vision of where things are heading.
So can I just start off with the second one?
Sure.
Great. The second really big explosion in our industry has been desktop publishing. Happened in 1985 with the Macintosh and the LaserWriter printer. And at that point, people could start to do on their desktops things that only typesetters and printers could do prior to that. And that's been a very big revolution in publishing. And those have really, those two explosions have been the only two real major revolutions which have caused a lot of people to buy these things and use them. The third one is starting to happen now. And the third one is, let's do for human-to-human communication what spreadsheets did for financial planning and what desktop publishing did for publishing. Let's revolutionize it using these desktop devices. And we're already starting to see the signs of that. As an example, in an organization, we're starting to see that as business conditions change faster and faster with each year, we cannot change our management hierarchical organization very fast relative to the changing business conditions. We can't have somebody working for a new boss every week. We also can't change our geographic organization very fast. Matter of fact, even slower than the management one. We can't be moving people around the country every week. But we can change an electronic organization like that. And what's starting to happen is, as we start to link these computers together with sophisticated networks and great user interfaces, we're starting to be able to create clusters of people working on a common task in literally in 15 minutes worth of setup. And these 15 people can work together extremely efficiently no matter where they are geographically and no matter who they work for hierarchically. And these organizations can live for as long as they're needed and then vanish. And we're finding we can reorganize our companies electronically very rapidly, and that's the only type of organization that can begin to keep pace with the changing business conditions. And I believe that this collaborative model has existed in higher education for a long time, but we're starting to see it applied into the commercial world as well. And this is going to be the third major revolution that these desktop computers provide, is revolutionizing human-to-human communication and group work. We call it interpersonal computing. In the 1980s, we did personal computing. And now we're going to extend that as we network these things to interpersonal computing.
Taking the long view now, what was the image of the computer in the mid-1960s or whenever you first saw one? And where are we now? How did the PC enact that change?
Right. I first saw my first computer when I was 12. I saw my first computer when I was 12, and it was at NASA. We have a local NASA center nearby, and it was a terminal which was connected to a big computer somewhere, and I got a time-sharing account on it, and I was fascinated by this thing. And I saw my second computer a few years later, which was really the first desktop computer ever made. Was made by Hewlett-Packard. It's called the 9100A, and it ran a language called BASIC, and it was very large. Had a very small cathode ray tube on it for display. And I got a chance to play with one of those maybe in 1968 or 9, and spent every spare moment I had trying to write programs for it. I was so fascinated by this. And so I was probably fairly lucky in that my introduction to computers very rapidly moved from a terminal to, within maybe 12 months or so, actually seeing one of the first, probably the first desktop computer ever really produced. And so my point of view never really changed from being able to get my arms around it, even though my arms probably didn't quite fit around that first one. So.
What was the role, how have personal computers changed the landscape of computers? I mean, back then it was centralized power, it was in a mainframe. Now we have 3 times as much power at the fringe than we have in the center, or 5 times as much power to